So welcome, Chris, to Impact Design. I'm very excited to interview you, and I would love you to explain in a few words what you've done in the past, especially as you've been very, very long time with Arup, and what you're doing now.
Thank you, Yasmin. It's great to be here with you. And it's great to be sitting here, unfortunately, at a distance. But at least we can do that. So I've been trained as an engineer and an architect both, so I've been a bridge builder for many, many years. This has been what I've tried to do. And at Arup, as I was the head of Foresight Research, Innovation, also Ventures, and a board member for a while, I was able to help us think about the future. And part of my responsibility there was to help make sure we were fit for purpose for the next 20 years. And now today I've come back to the ETH in Zurich to be the head of Strategic Foresight, to set up a unit here to help us look at the future. But two things just to mention before you start asking me. While I was at Arup, I was really proud of the fact that we were able to get the Sustainable Development Goals to be the foundation from the board all the way down through all of our projects. And I could talk about that if you want to a little bit later. And also setting up foresight as part of our vocabulary across the entire company.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for the introduction. Actually, that leads me to my first question, because you are really an expert in architecture, engineering, and you're interested in the environment. How do you put all these passion together, and how did it come into your practice?
That's a really good question. For me, I first started in engineering. And when I was introduced at Cornell to the bridges of the concrete bridges of Robert Maillard, the Swiss engineer, I was fascinated with this form, these incredibly beautiful forms, which I'd never seen before as an engineer being trained in the United States with everything's rectilinear. And so then I went to Switzerland to try to learn about this bridge design. And then while I was there, I was introduced to Santiago Calatrava. And so then I went to work for Santiago, and I was doing all the calculations for his works, his early works. And while at Santiago's office, I realized there was much more to a building than just the bones. And so then I became interested in architecture. So then I went into architecture. And so basically, my path has been one of just always unfolding into something new that caught my eye, must I say. And later in the profession, later in my career, I became increasingly concerned with the impact which we're having. And the impact not only on people, but on our planet, the impact of architecture, of our built environment, both as a positive force for good, but also as a force for destruction. And trying to think about what could we do to change that to being more of a force for good and creation than destruction.
Well, that leads me to my next question. You've been described as the Willy Wonka of the built environment. Why is that so?
You'd have to ask the guys at The Guardian. I don't know. I'm flattered by that, because I think Willy Wonka is a bit crazy. But I also think what I liked about Willy Wonka, and when I think about both versions of it, he was someone who had a vision about where he thought things needed to go. And for me, what I have really tried to do is help others think about where we need to go, where they need to go, so that we're doing the best we can for our planet. And this is not just for the rocks and all this, but for all the living things on the planet and ecosystems we're all codependent. So how can I help with that vision? And of course, someone said once, a vision with action is nothing but a daydream. And so therefore, how can we take vision and put these things into action? And that's of course the crucial thing today, is closing that knowing doing gap, right? Mm-hmm. And this is always the big challenge that so many of us face, is closing that gap.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Can you tell me a bit more about the Foresight Hub, the Strategic Foresight Hub?
Well, thanks for asking. The Strategic Foresight Hub is something we're building here in Zurich at the ETH. It is really focused on how can we help our institution and within because we're a federal institution for Switzerland. How can we help all of the businesses in Switzerland? And through its ripple effect, all the organizations which are based out of Switzerland look at the next 20 years, right? And is to actually look at it and not just with a capitalistic, globalized viewpoint, but trying to look at it with a balanced viewpoint. For example, what is the future of cybersecurity? What are the ethical issues involved with cybersecurity? What's the future of wellness? The future of mobility? What are all these things, and how are they going to work in sort of the new world order which is emerging? What will it look like? And well, so the hub's growing, and yeah. So stay tuned to that.
Very interesting. So coming to that point back, what is your vision then for how a future city should look like?
Well, the interesting thing for me, Yasmin, is cities have been around for a long time, and a city being a concentration of humans, let's just call that. And if you're in some places in the world that is maybe 300 people, and others it could be 300 million, So for me, the future of the city has to be a balanced environment that helps the entire natural and built ecosystem work symbiotically. I believe very strongly in the circular economy and donut economics, as well as the planetary boundaries, because the planetary boundaries with donut economics are, intimately involved there. And I don't know exactly what that looks like yet for a city, but I'm very excited and very pleased to see the work which is happening around the circular cities and in Amsterdam and other places now, because this is the direction we have to go. And that I'm convinced of. So when I think of my future vision, it is still a bit muddled, because quite frankly, it's very difficult for me to see how we get ourselves out of the kind of deep, dark ditch we've built ourselves into.
Do you have changed your mind since the pandemic about the city? Because the city has suffered a lot, if you look at the last year in a way.
Yeah, but if a year is nothing in the life of a city.
That's true.
I am completely a believer in the urban environment. Just think about this, Yasmin. If humans didn't forget, we would never fall in love twice, right?
True.
And so to me, the real question is, in 3 years' time or 5 years' time, when we look back at 2020, what will still be sticky? What will have stuck in our minds? I mean, I know that as soon as we can, we're all going to go back to having dinners and having parties and congregating at Trafalgar Square or down at the Champs-Élysées, because we're animals who like to interact and react. And I think I would argue we need that. Even introverts need this kind of interaction with the other, in German, Mitmensch. So yeah. I'm completely bullish on cities. But again, the question is, what kind of patterns are going to be, I'd say, permanently, semi-permanently, slightly altered?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm like you, I'm more positive, because I think it's like you said, 1 year is such a small time, frame within the grandness of even our lifetime. And I think it's, we have to move on, and we can just learn. If, just something to have learned from it, that would be fantastic. Move on.
I think, let me just say, so one thing I think is very, very, we've learned is the importance of physical presence in the typology of interaction. And I do hope that one of the lessons we'll take and will be sticky is the transactional does not necessarily require you to travel 3 hours to sign a piece of paper and to go back, or to have a meeting where it's easily done through video conferencing. But the creative and the personal will value even more when we can come together again. So I think this is one fundamental change which does have an impact on how we think about the spaces and places that we then curate within the city. So that to me is going to be I believe will be a lasting impact.
No, I agree, and it's more about mindful travel, as you said.
Yeah.
We will, but it's not just going in a plane for one signature or one short visit or to shake their hands, but it will be more exciting to meet somebody in person, but it's purposeful. It's not just happening. I totally agree. Yeah. Well, I have 2 more questions. The last 2 ones is, what inspired you to go into education, just in a very few sentences in general?
Well, I'm a 4th generation educator.
Ah, I didn't know that.
So education is in my family, in my genes, very important. And my grandmother used to always say, that no one can ever take an education from you. They can take your house, they can take everything, but they can't take your education.
Well, my mother said exactly the same thing. I just remember. Absolutely. Very true. Well, the last question is, what impact would you like to have on the world?
Well, for me, I would like to be able to not only look myself in the mirror, but to help others be able to look themselves in the mirror and say, I did everything that I could to be the best ancestor possible. Mm-hmm. And so that the next generations will talk about me or talk about you in a way which is, they made a positive difference. They helped. They were not part of the destruction. They were part of the regeneration. And that, to me, if I can help the regeneration continue and help our generation and the elders and the next generations be part of that vector, then I will be able to die a happy man.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. I think that was a very noble answer, and I totally agree. We have to see what our impact can be in this world that is positive for future generations, and everybody has their expertise to contribute to it, and that's what we all are supposed to do. That's what I believe. Yeah. Thank you so much for the interview, and wish you all the success in Zurich with ETH, and we look forward to hear more news from you about your exciting developments that you are working on.
Well, Yasmina, thank you so much, and thank you for your passion and your work to make sure the world is the best place it can be for the next generations.
Thank you very much. Thanks.